If dyslexia has nothing to do with your intelligence, then how come it's been standard practice for so long to use IQ tests as part of the assessment process for getting diagnosed with dyslexia? It turns out this is actually kind of a hotly debated topic, so let's talk about it. On the side of using IQ tests, there's a line in the definition of dyslexia that says the reading challenges that someone experiences can't be rooted in some other cognitive deficit. And therefore, the argument is that, well, we're using the IQ test to kind of suss out or rule out any other cognitive challenges that would better explain why reading is a challenge. And that kind of makes sense. That sounds logical. Another argument is that by using an IQ test, we're going to get a more accurate profile of who a person is, which means that if we're offering them supports, or if we're trying to figure out what resources they need, or maybe if they're twice exceptional or twice gifted, then we can better know that and better support them because maybe the IQ test will give us a clearer picture of who they are. So that's kind of the argument for using IQ tests. The argument against them, though, is pretty compelling, and that's why the direction that a lot of the dyslexia world seems to be going is away from using IQ tests. So the first argument against them is that we don't diagnose people with dyslexia based on that IQ test. Like that can be used to rule things out, but we diagnose someone based on their language skills, based on their phonetical skills. Another argument against them is that IQ tests have kind of a dark and scary history. They tend to be kind of discriminatory, inequitable, like against people who are bilingual, against people who are from low socioeconomic statuses, against neurodivergent individuals. Like there's a lot there about IQ tests that make them kind of questionable to use, especially if you really get into the history of how they were developed and why. And then finally, when we require the use of IQ tests for diagnosing something like dyslexia, that raises the bar of who can actually get access to being diagnosed, which is not really good for any of those people who have less resource, for people who don't have access to being able to get all of this really expensive testing done. And all of that is why the world of dyslexia does seem to be moving away from it. And I personally kind of think that's a really good thing. Because as much as it sounds cool to be like, oh, we're going to assess you so that we can really like figure out who you are and know how to better support you, a lot of the time, I think what it ends up doing is just making it so that people don't have equitable access to the resources that you get once you have a diagnosis of dyslexia, which arguably that's what we should be trying to give people access to, is being able to get those resources. And however we can make that more accessible, to me, seems like a good thing.